Proposed tax changes are often discussed as abstract policy levers, as line items in a bill, or as talking points in election cycles, but the reality is far more concrete. These changes touch the core mechanics of the program itself, the trust people place in it, and the long-term credibility of the system. When we talk about taxes in this context, we're not just talking about revenue. We're talking about predictability, sustainability, and fairness across generations. Every adjustment, no matter how small it seems on paper, sends signals to workers, retirees, markets, and global observers about how seriously we take long-term obligations. The program was built on a simple premise: shared contribution, shared benefit, shared responsibility. For decades, payroll taxes created a stable funding stream that people understood. You work, you contribute, and over time, that contribution becomes a form of earned security. Proposed tax changes challenge that understanding, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. When taxes on benefits are reduced or eliminated, or when payroll tax structures are altered, the immediate reaction is often positive. More money in people's pockets today feels like a win. But sustainability is never measured in months or even years. It's measured in decades. One of the most discussed proposals is the reduction or elimination of federal taxes on benefits. On the surface, this is appealing. Many retirees feel they have already paid their share. They contributed over a lifetime and believe they should not be taxed again on what they view as deferred earnings. That argument resonates emotionally and politically. However, from a funding perspective, those taxes are not symbolic. They represent a meaningful source of revenue that flows back into the program. Removing that revenue without replacing it changes the math immediately. The math matters. Trust funds don't operate on sentiment, they operate on inflows and outflows. When outflows exceed inflows consistently, reserves decline. This isn't a political opinion, it's an accounting reality. Any proposal that reduces inflows must be paired with a credible replacement mechanism. Otherwise, the system moves closer to a point where automatic benefit reductions become unavoidable. That outcome helps no one, least of all the people these proposals aim to protect. Another area under discussion is the payroll tax cap. Currently, income above a certain threshold is not subject to payroll taxes. Raising or eliminating that cap is often framed as a fairness issue. High earners, the argument goes, should contribute more. From a revenue standpoint, this approach is one of the most direct ways to strengthen the program. It increases inflows without reducing benefits. But it also raises questions about incentives, compensation structures, and how income is reported. High-income individuals and businesses respond to tax changes. That response must be anticipated, not ignored. Tax policy never exists in isolation. It interacts with labor markets, investment behavior, and wage growth. When payroll taxes increase for certain income levels, employers may adjust compensation strategies. Workers may see changes in how income is structured. The net revenue gain may differ from projections if behavioral effects are underestimated. This doesn't mean such proposals are flawed, but it does mean they require rigorous modeling and realistic assumptions. Optimism is not a substitute for analysis. There is also discussion around introducing new forms of taxation tied indirectly to the program, such as broader income surtaxes or alternative funding streams. These ideas are often presented as creative solutions, but creativity must be matched with clarity. People need to understand how the program is funded. Complexity erodes trust. When funding mechanisms become opaque, public confidence weakens. A system that relies on widespread participation cannot afford confusion. Transparency is not a luxury, it's a requirement. Intergenerational equity is another dimension that cannot be overlooked. Younger workers already question whether the program will be there for them. Proposed tax changes that appear to favor current beneficiaries without addressing long-term solvency reinforce that skepticism. If younger generations believe they are paying into a system that will not deliver comparable benefits, participation becomes grudging rather than willing. That shift in mindset is dangerous for any program built on collective buy-in. At the same time, ignoring the financial realities facing current retirees is not an option. Inflation, healthcare costs, and housing expenses have all placed pressure on fixed incomes. Tax relief can provide real, immediate help. The challenge is designing relief that is targeted, responsible, and paired with long-term stabilization measures. Blanket changes may be politically attractive, but precision is often more effective than broad strokes. Another proposed change involves adjusting how benefits are indexed and how tax thresholds are updated over time. When thresholds are not indexed properly, more people are pulled into taxation simply because of inflation, not increased real income. Addressing this issue is less about generosity and more about fairness. Indexing adjustments are technical, but their impact is real. Done correctly, they can preserve purchasing power without undermining the funding base. What often gets lost in public debate is the cumulative effect of multiple changes. One proposal alone may appear manageable. Two may still seem feasible. But when several revenue-reducing measures are layered on top of each other, the system absorbs the impact all at once. Policymaking must account for interactions, not just individual provisions. The program doesn't experience these changes one at a time. It experiences them simultaneously. Markets are also watching. The stability of large social programs influences broader confidence in fiscal governance. Investors look at long-term obligations when assessing economic risk. Persistent uncertainty around funding and taxation sends signals that extend beyond the program itself. Responsible tax reform can strengthen confidence. Poorly coordinated reform can weaken it. There is also a tendency to frame tax changes as either pro-beneficiary or anti-beneficiary. That framing is misleading. A well-funded program is pro-beneficiary by definition. Ensuring solvency is not an abstract goal. It is the most direct way to protect benefits. Any proposal that undermines funding without a replacement mechanism ultimately harms the very people it claims to support. The conversation must also acknowledge political reality. Tax changes do not exist in a vacuum. They must pass through legislative processes, survive amendments, and withstand shifts in leadership. Proposals that rely on ideal conditions or perfect implementation are fragile. Durable reform requires broad support and clear communication. People don't need to agree on every detail, but they need to understand the direction and the rationale. Communication matters more than ever. When people hear about tax changes, they immediately ask one question: how does this affect me? If the answer is unclear or contradictory, skepticism grows. Clear messaging about who benefits, who contributes, and why certain trade-offs are necessary is essential. Trust is built through honesty, not promises that avoid difficult truths. Ultimately, the program reflects a social contract. Taxes are the mechanism through which that contract is honored. Changing those mechanisms reshapes the contract itself. That responsibility should be approached with humility and seriousness. Short-term relief and long-term stability are not mutually exclusive, but achieving both requires discipline. The most successful reforms will be those that acknowledge reality without fear, protect vulnerable populations without jeopardizing the future, and align incentives rather than distort them. Tax changes can strengthen the program, but only if they are designed as part of a comprehensive strategy rather than isolated gestures. The debate will continue, as it should. This program is too important for silence and too complex for slogans. Thoughtful reform demands patience, data, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable numbers. When tax policy is guided by those principles, it can serve not just today's beneficiaries, but generations to come.